gets berated on the podcast we've created to commemorate action flicks, big horror, no tricks. John Travolta, Chuck Norris, insane clown posse, no fuss, no mercy, we discuss. Everything gets berated, no one is underrated. From the screen to the stage, except a new cage. No mercy, we engage.
Welcome to Everything Gets Berated, the Apple Subscriber Podcast, where we talk about everything other than indie horror. I'm Anthony, and tonight here with me is Garrett. You've heard him on a few of our main podcasts. What's up, man?
Hello, everybody. Happy to be here for this one.
Yeah, I was like, when I saw this on the shelf at Target, I was like, I can't believe they made a movie about Calvary Chapel.
Yeah, when you first reached out to me and told me about it, I looked it up, and a part of me was like, I wonder if, we're in this movie. Because, we were part of that whole movement for most of our adolescence.
Yeah, which this is way back in the 60s, 70s?
Yeah. Yeah, the origin story.
The origin story of Calvary Chapel Costa Mesa.
Calvary begins.
But yeah, so for the people that haven't watched this movie, the gist is basically this is the story of Greg Laurie and Chuck Smith and maybe a little bit about Lonnie Frisbee and just the creation of Calvary Chapel Costa Mesa and Harvest, because they kind of throw that in at the end.
Yeah, it's a nice look into the Jesus movement from the eyes of, a couple central players. Albeit it was easy to see how much of the disgusting things that some of these people did just get completely glossed over.
Oh yeah.
But I guess that's how these things work typically.
But yeah, they did do like I want to say, on maybe not Greg Laurie so much, because this really doesn't kind of pertain to him so much, but like they do kind of like a hero edit on Chuck Smith and Lonnie Frisbee.
Yeah, there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes, like the back end of Calvary Chapel, the governing body, the patriarchy, protecting a lot of the, sexual and inappropriate sexual behaviors from male pastors towards female staff. Like there was just it seemed like there was a lot of things done to try to protect those pastors, from what I had been reading online.
Yeah, I didn't read a lot about that, but I did get because right off the bat in this movie, we get that that title card thing. It's like based on a true revolution, and it's like,
yeah,
like this is where I know I'm about to get a bunch of BS thrown in my face. Like, you can't even say story because they're like, it's not even really the same story. Like, it's the people are the same, but I don't know how true it is. Like, so
yeah, it was. And as old as Kelsey Grammer is in the present, they did an okay job of, sort of de-aging him digitally, but I was kind of expecting them to cast someone a bit younger for the young Chuck Smith, because it was already old in the 60s. It's like he wasn't 120 when he passed away.
Yeah, really. He was like in his 80s when he passed away.
Yeah.
So he would have been like in his 60s when we saw him speak.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, because he looked about like Kelsey Grammer at that point, as far as like age-wise, facially.
Yeah.
Which, okay, so this movie starts off and we get like a little bit of Chuck and a little bit of Greg, basically. Like it's kind of like they split time in the opening narrative part where uh my favorite part of the opening is what is it? Chuck Smith's daughter picks up homeless Jesus and because he makes that smart ass comment, if like I'll change the way I do my services if if God tells me to. Like he basically like makes a smart ass comment like that. So his daughter, sets off to piss him off, basically. Like uh like that part for me was one of the funniest parts of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Which I don't even know if they're intending it for it to be that funny, but it was pretty funny when Lonnie shows up at his door.
Yeah. Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, like okay, so I did a little bit of internet research, and Lonnie is played by Jonathan Roumie. He plays Jesus in that series The Chosen. On it I forget, like it's streaming, it's on a bunch of different TV channels. I think it's on the CW now. Um but because when I saw him I was like, he looks like Jesus. So he literally like just didn't change his look at all. He's like, for as little as you're paying me, I have a better job.
Yeah. I mean,
But
I think he kind of actually he represents the prototypical like Western surfer Jesus more than he does what we, what realistically Jesus would have looked like.
yeah, so basically they we go from there and we go to like Greg Laurie meeting his future wife. And like that moment where Greg they're doing that the nuclear disaster drill.
Mm-hmm.
Like we've done one of those when I was in the military, and one of the drill sergeants was like, it's like if there was a nuclear accident we'd probably all be dead, but we are required to do this drill. And like when he's like, do you know the blast radius of a nuclear weapon and the impact that it has? It's like we'd all be dead right now. I'm like, you took the words right out of my mouth. Like, this is stupid. This is pointless.
Yeah, I just remember that was one of those moments when he's like standing at the gate. I think it was a university, right? He was kind of outside of the
like
university
with his camera staring at her.
Yeah, I remember that scene, and just you told me before I watched the movie that there would I would probably have a good deal of nostalgia, and I did. Like that was one of those scenes where it was just like, obviously I wasn't around then, but you and I had been to several crusades. We'd been to plenty of harvest services of different kinds, different age groups, and I can't remember how many times I've heard Greg speak, but it was just weird and nostalgic in a kind of a fun way to see this person playing him as a young boy or a young man, meeting his wife. It's kind of like, God, I kind of wish I knew you then, not who you are now.
I know. Like now it's just like, I mean, like what was it? He was in the headlines for like holding mass spreader rallies, which I mean, not to get political because now science is political apparently. And like he held a fundraiser for President Trump, which I mean that's like a huge no-no for churches because
Greg
that's
Laurie did.
yeah, like
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah.
like they tried to keep it like adjacent so they couldn't get in trouble for it, but basically they were raising money for the Republican nominee.
Oh, okay.
Because they can't tell you who to vote for, but like the fact that they were raising the money in its own was a bit of a conflict of interest.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that was the guy that played Greg Laurie. That's Joel Courtney. which I
Hmm.
had to do a little looking up on him too. Um, he was in Half Baked, Totally High. And he was also in the Kevin Williamson movie that was on Peacock, Sick. And he was in The Kissing Booth 1 and 2, or 2 and 3. Oh, actually, the all the Kissing Booth movies. So this is kind of like a new thing now that like Christian cinema is, or like Christian filmmakers are hiring actors that may or may not be Christian just for name recognition, pure and alone.
Yeah, I remember when I had left Calvary and I had started going to church on the other side of town, this big evangelical church, Trinity, or no, yeah, it was Trinity. And then I spent some time there, played on the worship team for a long time, and then I left, and that was kind of around the time I like decided to walk away from the church. And I remember contacting one of the pastors there later on, and I said, "Hey, I'm still playing guitar. I was curious if you guys had an opening on the worship team." And he's like, "Are you still a Christian?" And I'm like, "Absolutely not." And he's like, "Well, then you can't be on this worship team." And I'm like, "What difference does it make if I'm playing an instrument and I'm not moving my lips? Like, I'm not going to spread Satanism to the crowds by strumming GCD over and over and over."
Yeah.
It's like, but at the same time, Christianity continues to become progressively more and more secular in order to fill seats, and it has to continue to dilute itself in order to be relevant. And um, sorry, I guess I don't mean to tangent the conversation, but that,
No, no, you're good.
yeah, if they leaned heavily into old school thinking, we must use actors who are Christian. Good luck making a quality movie.
Well, yeah, I think that was a lot of the problem they're running into is the second you go all Christian actors, you lose all name recognition.
Yeah.
Because that's the like, whether people like it or not, the reality is if you're going to put something out in a theater, you need to put names on a poster that people know.
Hmm.
And like that's why you go after Kelsey Grammer, who may or may not be Christian. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't matter. It matters that he's Kelsey Grammer. You
Yeah.
go after Joel Courtney, you go after, whoever it is that played his girlfriend in the movie. Um, because she's also like she's been in a bunch of like rom-com stuff. Anna Grace Barlow, that's who it is. Um, yeah, she's been in like a bunch of like horror films and romantic comedies. Um, but yeah, and also who is it? Like the woman that plays Greg Laurie's mom. That's Brad Paisley's wife.
Okay, so
The
there's a good chance that she's a Christian.
Yeah, no, like I'm about 99% sure she's a Christian.
Definitely stereotyping there, but
Yeah.
it's an educated guess.
Which like for me, when they introduce her, it's like the silliest, cheesiest alcoholic portrayal I've ever seen. It's like that classic 1950s, good son who pulls the cigarette out of her hand and like, because she's so drunk she passed out with a lit cigarette in her hand.
Hmm.
And it's like, I'm like, wow, this is something right out of the old like don't drink and drive 1950s warning videos.
Hmm.
It felt a little silly.
This movie for me though was I've watched it several times, and a couple times was with different members of my family and who are dedicated Christians, and they really enjoyed it for different reasons. But I actually thought it was a decent story. There were some interesting conflicts that you see getting resolved. I tried to kind of subtract my own religious views and just appreciate it for what it was. And it it plays better than most Christian music plays, if you know what I mean by that.
Well,
Like,
yeah, it it actually has like a sense of reality to it.
yeah,
Like if you knew nothing else, this could be a believable story.
yeah. because there's a lot of human elements that are largely overlooked in Christian music lyrics. It's like they're all just Jesus love songs for the most part, or at least okay. Um, to your listeners, to be fair, I was listening to Christian pop music throughout most of the late 90s and early 2000s, and that's what it was characterized by, like Jesus love songs.
Yeah.
But today I don't know, but I just remember that was a criticism of a lot of Christian music, is like, write songs about life. Like, just because you're a Christian and you're a musician doesn't mean you're subject to only write lyrics about how much you love Jesus. Like,
Well, I
there's a lot of people,
mean,
you know.
yeah, like in fairness, we came up in the time when like contemporary Christian music, CCM, like it was kind of like at its height.
Yeah.
And you had like the Newsboys and DC Talk and like all this stuff. And like and that was right around the time that it was like I've heard it talked about on other podcasts as like Christian extremism, where basically it was like, how can I go the farthest I can go to show how Christian I am? Because it was like a competition between people to be the most Christian you could possibly be. Like,
Hmm.
to the point that you have purity culture, which was like the most harmful and stupid thing to come out of Christianity. Like even
Yeah.
what's his name? Was it Joshua Harris?
Hmm.
The author that wrote I Kiss Dating Goodbye, like, and was like, you know, it was like an extension of purity culture. It was the courtship, um, the whole deal and all that. And like he even denounced his book and the detrimental effects it had on a lot of people's lives. Um, but yeah, like that was where we came from, where it was a whole out denial of reality.
Yeah. And that, yeah. So full circle, this movie to me didn't feel like it was doing the equivalent of what Christian music and some Christian authors did in our sort of like, you know, sort of our most sorry, I'm in a brain fart at the moment. Our formative Christian years. This movie felt more grounded.
Oh
I
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's definitely worth a watch for anyone who is even remotely curious about what Calvary Chapel, or who Calvary Chapel is, and a bit of their origin stories. But I also would recommend, if you get really interested in it, definitely do a fair amount of Googling and balance it, because the movie isn't meant to be like, here's how it got started and here's a bunch of the horrible things that were going on behind the scenes that no one ever talks about. Like, it's not meant to do that. It wasn't the point of it.
Yeah, yeah. This is very much like Lionsgate telling a hero story,
Yeah.
because if I read correctly, Greg Laurie is one of the executive producers, so he put up a significant sum of money to have his story told, as well as Chuck Smith's.
Oh, okay.
So,
Wow.
I mean, I'm assuming that, they were, fairly nice to the material just for the simple fact that it's his money,
Hmm.
which I didn't really get to look into it, but I think it's Lionsgate, so they probably won't do that. But I know that there's a like, because it made $50 million. So I don't know if like they used a sub production company name to make the movie, and then like there's a practice with, who is it, Angel Studios has put out a couple of movies. They put out that The Sound of Freedom and like one of these other movies, and basically like The Sound of Freedom made $200 million. But like what they're not telling you is they have this thing they do, and it's like it comes off fairly innocent, but basically it's ticket sharing. So when you buy a ticket for yourself, you can buy a ticket for somebody else,
Okay.
so somebody else can go in and watch the movie. But
That's cool.
basically, yeah, it ended up with sold out theaters with 6 people in the theater.
Jeez.
So they were taking all these tickets and just applying it to empty theaters to basically sell $200 million worth of tickets. And I think they did the same thing on their next movie. So it was a big money trick.
Makes you wonder, because the way the movie writes Chuck Smith's motivations to appeal to hippies, um, contextually for people who are listening, we were told as people who, were part of the Calvary movement for over a decade, that this was like the church that you went to if you were, I'm just going to throw a few like sort of subcultures out there that may have normally felt like they weren't, welcome, but like punks, skaters, stoners, witches, like there's a lot of goths, like there's just would have been a lot of people that normally, feel really out of place walking into, a Presbyterian chapel, you know.
Yeah.
um, but Calvary was marketed as like the place that you went to feel accepted. And so the backstory was sort of like, oh yeah, back in the 70s, Chuck Smith let the hippies just walk right in without their shoes. And the movie kind of like hits on that. But at the same time, I critically was like trying to think about, okay, well, if his church was sort of diminishing, it behooves him to like be increasingly restrictive and, only let certain types. And so there was part of me that was like, was he being an opportunist and just saw a business opportunity here in a group of people that were spiritually hungry? Or was it legitimately like, hey, no, the gospel of Christ belongs to everybody, So it just got me wondering, the movie kind of doesn't try to push one story over another, but in my mind, the story we were given as going to Calvary all those years made it sound like it was all about sharing the gospel.
Yeah.
But
And I think they try to keep Chuck very altruistic in this movie.
yeah.
They really do. Okay, so when we get into like the church stuff in
Mm-hmm.
the movie, like I did think it was like a good, interesting story touch that, they're complaining that some of his old members are complaining that, they come in and they're not wearing shoes and this and that. And so he starts like washing everybody's feet before they walk in.
Yeah.
Like it's a Jesus thing. And you guys have to shut the fuck up now about people not wearing shoes. Like he's being creative with scripture, basically. That's the way I took it.
Yeah, that's how I remember it being put to us as well when we were younger. Going to Calvary was like I saw this picture of, Jesus washing feet, and that came to mind when I saw that scene with Kelsey Grammer. I also gagged a little bit because I was like, ew, that's gross.
Washing hippie feet. Like they probably haven't even bathed. That's the only part of their body that will be clean. It probably just smelled like patchouli in there. Which I mean, they did make a patchouli joke in the movie too. Which, like, when Chuck Smith was like, they probably smell horrible and they smell like patchouli. I'm like, good job, Chuck. I like you. Like, I'm on your side.
Yeah.
Like stinky, smelly hippies. Like,
I don't know, man. If the pastor of our Calvary Chapel growing up ever decided to wash my feet on my way in, I might have been like, no, man, you know how hard it was to put these shoes on? I'm not taking off and get my feet all wet. Like,
yeah, really. But then you're gonna have a messed up carpet because like all these people with wet feet are now coming in the building. So you're gonna have the
yeah,
soppy, wet carpet.
I bet you, man, I bet you if you were to walk into that new sanctuary, well, it's not new anymore, but like at the time when it was first built, it'd been hilarious to like put them to the test and just get a bunch of people like a flash mob and just come in, everyone bare feet, tattered clothes, just like we heard this is where anybody can come, and we were hoping maybe we can get our feet washed, and just like, oh, Calvary Chapel circa 2003 is not prepared for your dirty feet.
Yeah, we don't do that anymore. That was a thing, but we don't do that anymore.
Our founder did that, but he's kind of doesn't have a say in it anymore.
Yeah, which like okay, so then one of the parts we talked about with like the lack of reality in this that is kind of gets glossed over is like they have this whole narrative in the movie that's just woven in that like Lonnie Frisbee becomes this charismatic pastor
Oh yeah.
that starts like I sense you have an ailment, like starts doing that the kind of like success pastor thing.
Yeah.
And like they use that to say he became too big for the role he was in and he needed to leave the church, more or less, which that's really not the reality of it. Like there's the documentary with Lonnie Frisbee where he basically said, or they basically said, Lonnie Frisbee was gay.
Hmm.
He was married, but like I think he said he was bisexual.
Okay.
Um, and he had shared that testimony um early on at his time at Calvary Chapel, but he was basically asked to stop talking about it because it was making people uncomfortable that he would share this, and also coupled with the fact that he would party on Saturday night and preach on Sunday morning, and he was doing lots of drugs and ended up getting a divorce from his wife, which they kind of like like crumply
Yeah.
paper that. They're like, oh, they just left. Like, no, they got divorced. Like, so it was like a bunch of stuff there where they were just like, it was like the grand gloss over.
Which I guess makes sense considering the point was more of an like a Calvary origin story, so not a Lonnie, progression or evolution story. Um, but I would have liked more, little factoids thrown in in the end during the credit sequence. A lot of times they'll just kind of let you know. I think they might have done that about some of the baptisms that continued on with Greg Laurie in I forgot the name of the cove.
Oh, sorry, what was that?
Oh, Pirates Cove,
Yeah,
right?
Pirates Cove. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it would have been nice to have some factual things thrown in there in the end that just, you know, raise the credibility of the film a little bit, because so much of it was just clearly painting these, rosy colors all over everything.
Definitely. Which, like, I think one of the things they mentioned in the Lonnie Frisbee documentary was that um, Chuck Smith was well aware that Lonnie Frisbee was bisexual, and that,
Mhm.
like, even the pastor that Lonnie worked for after Chuck, um, he sat down to lunch with that guy, and the first question he asks that pastor unprompted is, he's gay, right? So it's like, and like all of that's fine, but then the part to me that kind of feels a little bit hypocritical is in the 80s, uh even after Chuck Smith started working with Lonnie Frisbee again, um he would speak against homosexuality.
Chuck
It's like,
Smith.
yeah, Chuck Smith spoke against homosexuality in the 80s, like in a very aggressive way.
Yeah, that all kind of adds up from my impression of him. Um, I was going to look this up and fact check it on the internet, but what was the church that Lonnie ended up going on to start that became like a really huge movement? It was
I
another
don't
one of
know.
those. Um, yeah, because I used to listen to a bunch of their worship music. Hillsong, I think it was Hillsong.
Was he a Hillsong guy?
Let me look. Maybe I'm thinking of the Calvary
Oh, and the Vineyard movement.
Vineyard. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was writing, or not writing, but when I was playing worship music a lot at Calvary, I was using Vineyard songs that whole movement was writing. I had no idea of Lonnie's involvement with Vineyard. It was really cool when I learned that.
Yeah. So I mean, like his whole like I get it. It's not the Lonnie story. So
Yeah.
you can kind of like pass off a lot of that and it's excusable. But the fact that like Chuck is so tied into that for me was like a little bit like it made me pause a little bit.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so later in the story, like the part that I thought was so like it just felt like they pulled like a drug scene right out of Red Asphalt was like you get that like I'm pretty sure they're doing LSD at that party where uh where Greg Laurie's wife's sister almost dies,
Yeah.
but they don't say it, right? They're all just like, whoa, like just like drug tripping. I'm like, that's LSD. Um, but then like even that car crash, it just felt so like something they pulled out of Red Asphalt. And it just it like I don't know, it felt like a little bit much.
Are you talking about the scene where Greg Laurie is in the Volkswagen van?
Yeah, he's in the Volkswagen van after she has said, I don't want to be with you if you're gonna do drugs.
That scene was so stressful. Like if I were tripping on acid or mushrooms or LSD, like, and I were in the back of a van without any restraint, and the person driving the van was in the state of the person driving the van in that movie, it I would be like, I would jump out the window. Like I kept going like, why are you like, get out. You'd be better off just jumping out of this vehicle before this dude like it. There were like three or four near head-on collisions, and it yeah, that scene was super stressful to watch.
Yeah, it was just like for me, like that, it just felt like bad decision theater. Like he's like I'm high on drugs and I'm gonna speed down this road like we're in Fast and the Furious. Like what are you doing, bro? Like I
Yeah.
thought people like instinctually become more cautious as the more stuff they're on.
So feel free to take this entire part out if you want to, but I was just thinking this was interesting. So you know how if you're ever in like a heightened emotional state, some people who love you might tell you something like, "Don't make any big decisions right now."
Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to add to the list of big decisions you should not be making while recovering from an LSD trip as choosing your religion. Like I found that I found it within, my 26 years of being a part of the Christian, family, that many, many, many times, if not exclusively, desperation precedes a conversion,
Yeah.
and it's like for me, it removes credibility. It's like you're in this state where you're, emotionally amped up and you feel helpless or hopeless, and it's like you're reaching out for anything that's a lifeline. And when you have Christianity with such a positive message, with regards to an eternal standing with God and being able to be reunited with family and all this other stuff, it's a perfect antidote for desperate people.
Well, and the
And
perfect way for you to be able to kind of like alibi your own bad behavior and be like, see, I'm forgiven. Everything's good now. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah,
I just,
stories for me, and again, I'm maybe it was like this for Greg Laurie, so if the movie was painting a good picture of it, then fine. But I'm more interested in stories of people making, and I don't care if it's Christianity or um, any other major or not so major religion. Like my thing is it's more interesting to watch someone like slowly evolve into thinking differently, even when things are great.
Yeah.
Like because when things are great, you tend to become complacent. And even in that complacency, if you're able to like find a philosophy that works for you, I'm more interested in that story than I am someone who's hit rock bottom and that's when they make their decision. Because that just
Yeah.
feels, I don't know, that just feels too, it just feels way too easy.
Yeah. But that whole scene was just so comical. It's like I forget, does he like fly out of the car or whatever, but he ends up on the sidewalk or in the grass by the sidewalk, and like and Lonnie looking like Jesus walks up to him. I'd have a religious experience too if I'm still on drugs and a guy who looks like Jesus just walked up to me.
I know.
Yeah, I was that that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like it's pretty easy to have one. Um, but yeah, so we move on from that part in the movie, and then it's all about how their movement and like building the church and all that stuff, right? Um, which I think I pointed it out to you. Like Goldberg, the goalie from the Mighty Ducks, is in this movie, which you don't recognize him unless you've seen the Instagram stuff from like 4 or 5 years ago where he was like a homeless drug addict in real life.
Right.
Like, and he ends up playing like a homeless vet drug addict.
Yeah, I don't
So
remember the scene clearly, but yeah, I
he's the
remember
guy in
you
the
telling me about
wheelchair
it.
that comes into the church.
Oh, oh shit. That's
That's
Goldberg.
Goldberg. Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm gonna watch it again just for that.
Yeah, that's him. Like he's in 2 scenes in the movie.
Wow.
Which I mean, he looks like he did a shit ton of drugs. He looks messed up. Which I'm happy he's healthy, but I mean, like it took a toll.
Yeah.
Um, but so oh yeah, sorry, where were we in the trying to mentally keep up with
The
like
growth of the church.
yeah, basically the growth of the church. That's where we're at. Like the um which they kind of like they're are they trying to say in this movie um that they uh created the idea of the like the chick track, with the drawings and the like the simple message to get you to know about a concept about God, because they act like nobody had ever thought of this before Greg Laurie.
Yeah, that I'd like to fact check that because I don't know the stories behind those. Those things though to me are so annoying. Like we are intelligent enough to find information and well, some people are intelligent enough to find information and make decisions on things like this. And tracks are like so insulting to the human intellect. And like, I'm sorry if you're out there right now and a Bible track is what made you change your mind. You may want to look inward.
Yeah, because I mean I've read some of these. Like somebody at my last job left like they I think they went to an African church because a lot of the drawings like I was like if this is supposed to be like a black person in this picture, this is the most insulting version of a black person in this picture. But
Jesus.
they like I don't want to, I'm not trying to sound racist. Like they made the scientist black woman look like the missing link. Like
Oh yeah.
I'm not trying to say, like monkey or anything like that, but like they literally made her look like the missing link and made her like sound and talk like she was stupid. And like
This is in the Bible track.
this was in a Bible track from what I'm assuming was an African church. And I was like, this is bonkers.
I mean, they reach some people, which is wild to me. Um, I had a I had a lady come up to me once in a restaurant. It was like, I don't know, it was like Rubio's just opened. It was in the morning, they
Oh,
just opened. And I was having some fish tacos and a beer. And it was in the morning. And church, the probably the 8 o'clock service just got out. And this big family was sitting near me, and I could tell they all just got out of church. It's obvious when you've spent as many years in church as we have.
yeah.
Um, one of the ladies comes up to me and she just goes, God spoke to me God spoke to me and told me that you needed some love, and he wanted me to come over here and tell you that he loves you. And I looked at her, and she had tracts with her, and I remember looking at her and I'm like, are you sure it wasn't the fact that I'm drinking a beer at 9 in the morning?
Yeah. And you feel bad for me because you think
Like
I'm sad and lonely.
yeah, you're looking at me like, oh, this reprobate who's enjoying a Corona, which you can barely call a beer.
Yeah. I mean, that's a cerveza. It's light. I mean, it's the lightest of the beers.
I will tell, and I remember thinking to myself, I will tell you that out of everything that Rubio's had on the menu to drink, this by far goes the best with this fish taco, and that's my reason for choosing it.
Yeah.
But they have this internal this narrative that's built on life experience and their definitions of certain concepts and a bunch of other things, and all in one moment her intuition, her gut just tells her to come over and talk to me, but then they write it off as the Holy Spirit.
Yeah. It's the
Oh,
spirit. Yeah.
it's not me, it's not me, it's the Holy Spirit judging you, it's not me. And so anyways, yeah, like I put that same camp of people and the people who hand out Bible tracts. Like you'd rather not get to know people, you just want to leave ridiculous propaganda on people's homes, cars, personal belongings, hoping that eventually you throw enough shit at the wall, something's going to stick. Like that's what it is.
Yeah, which I mean, when they go out and they're handing out tracks or whatever, like that was one of my favorite scenes because like people are just like throwing the track on the ground or throwing it in the trash right in front of them, and I'm like yeah, this is what most people do with this, so you can't really be mad at them. At least they're being upfront with you about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd at least be polite and be like, "Oh, thank you," and walk around the corner and just dump it in the trash. I mean, um, okay, so the other thing with this movie that I found to be interesting is okay, so you know how they always try to pass off the kind of like the male mentality thing where it's like I'm the man, I get to do whatever I want. Like I got a little bit of that from Greg Laurie, and it doesn't really ever get resolved at the end. Like it
Hmm.
felt like a little Christian fuckboy the
Mm-hmm.
way he behaves, that basically he gets into a fight with his girlfriend, leaves her crying, but he's going to come back and say, I have a church and I get to be a pastor there. And like all of a sudden this is supposed to mend all the shitty stuff he's done through this entire movie. Like he continues to do drugs after her sister almost dies. He, like they have a breakup and he's a dick about it. Um, like it just kind of felt like it just felt like Christian fuckboy. Like he's like, I can get whatever woman I want. Like, you know, like that's the attitude I got off him.
Yeah, and that aligns whether or not they meant it to, but that aligns perfectly with the um the hierarchy within Calvary, and I'm pretty sure Harvest as well. And that is, women do not serve in the role of a pastor; like they are subordinate to men. Um, so yeah, Calvary and Harvest have not quite moved on past that whole nonsense. Um, I mean, women can serve within certain roles in those governing bodies, but they can't pastor a church.
Which, I mean,
and
yeah,
yeah,
like I did get that sense in this movie that like, I mean, I know that, they give Chuck Smith's wife a name, but she could just be wife and
right.
it would almost work just as well.
Woman.
She has one opinion in the entire movie, and it's something that Chuck happens to agree with, so it's okay she had an opinion.
Right.
And like you get the same kind of energy from Greg Laurie's girlfriend because basically like he's a complete fucking turd, and all of a sudden now magically he says he's sorry, and it's like, oh, he's sorry, we're good now, I
Mm,
forgive you. Like, we're not gonna have a discussion about this. We're not gonna like, make sure this doesn't happen again. Like, see that behavior has changed.
mm.
Like it's very weird.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, there's nothing about the skill of leadership, because really that's, when you're a pastor, there's no like there's no magic involved. You're leading. That's what you're doing. And women are perfectly capable and in many cases superior to men when it comes to leading. And um, it's sad that so many of these movements have yet to sort of. I mean, I know a lot of churches do, but I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty certain that Calvary and Harvest maintain that very traditional sort of subordinate position for women. And if you do a little research, that goes back to what I was saying about a lot of the pastors within the Calvary movement who were having sexual charges filed against them from women from women within, I believe it was the like church staff, and Chuck Smith to the rescue, going to make sure that we give you all the legal defense and all these other things that you need, and a lot of really positive publicity. And so, yeah, like I wouldn't want to be a wife to any of like any of the pastors in the Calvary Church movement,
Yeah.
because that's their starting position is that women are subordinate to men, and I'm just, in terms of my core values, I'm against that. Like I think women are perfectly capable of leadership,
Oh yeah,
and
totally.
I don't buy into that whole.
Which I do remember, I think Pastor Ed did make a comment at a service or two when at least when I was there. I don't know if you were there for those, but uh like he would say, like God wants men to be the leaders
Hmm.
because like he wants people to challenge themselves because this is not a role that is natural for men. So, but being a leader is easier for women. And like when I heard that, like it fit with the theology. So I was like, okay, that makes sense. But now when I hear it now, I'm like, that's silly. That's silly logic. It's like,
Yeah.
do you want Tom Brady to be a neurochemist because it's easier for neurochemists to be a neurochemist, but it's harder for Tom Brady?
Hmm.
Like, that doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, it's just a bunch of creative tap dancing to be like, we don't really want you to, so we're just gonna like say a thing. But okay, so in wrapping up, like looking at this as just a movie,
Hmm.
like, would you say this is a really good movie?
No, I would say it's an average film, but it's above average compared to other Christian flicks that I've seen.
That's fair. That's
But
fair.
objectively, you know, outside of any other genre, is it a good film? Not, in my opinion, it's not.
I think it had like nice emotional moments, but that is if you ignore the past actions and the reality of the situation.
Hmm.
Because I know that moment at the end is supposed to be like, this the big tear jerking moment between Greg Laurie and his girlfriend. It's like, come with me. I have a church. And it's like, like ignore the fact that I've been a complete turd this entire time. Like he is the weird stoner idiot in the sex comedy that has been miscast into a Christian movie. Like
Yeah.
that's the way it feels. And they try to emotionalize it at the end. And like I don't know, like it didn't fly with me.
Yeah, and they focused a lot on the dynamic between Greg and his wife, or at the time girlfriend, was and they, like I said, they put emphasis on this line, which was, if you ever come between me and God, we're over, or something like that. That, do you remember that line?
I do remember that line, yeah.
Yeah,
And it's
and
supposed to be like a
that's,
funny moment.
yeah, and then like what was so cringy about those moments for me was that's actually how, probably even the same today, if not worse. But when I was going to Calvary Chapel, that sentiment was like preached into me. And maybe you'll remember this, but I had one relationship in particular, which was this person would, at that time, ended up becoming my wife for a very short period. but but like we split before our relationship really turned on, because we felt God was like, oh, this relationship is the center of your life, not me. Looking back, like, God brought so, well, the idea of God brought this like abstract value to my life that I would give a name and attribute it to God. But like my ex gave me like real tangible value that was there, that you could hold and appreciate and experience, you
Yeah.
know? And like the idea that we are, you and I and others are preached at, in that if another human relationship comes before God, a physical thing that loves you, that will take care of you, that will be there for you, if that comes before this invisible force that's in your gut, that you're writing off as the Holy Spirit, if that comes before the Holy Spirit, it's a hindrance to your growth. Like that's that's how you build like these religious zealots, and it's, sorry, I
No, you're good. You're good.
I want this to be a movie review, but at the same time, it's for you and I both. This was very on the nose, you
Yeah.
know, and I wouldn't say I regret, but I wish, looking back, that I hadn't thought that way, because, my own mother at one point in time told me, I love you very much, but if you're not in heaven someday with me there, so be it. It won't matter to me then, because I'll be in heaven. And it's
Yeah.
like, I know my mom loves me. I know she does. But Christianity breeds this type of odd thinking into our minds, that like somehow, if you love a human too much before God, you got to pull back on that love. Now I'm like, the second you start to have that kind of deep love with someone, hold on to it, because it's going to be gone someday.
Yeah.
I can't,
Exactly.
if someone came up to me right now and told me, you need to love your partner less because God is starting to take a back seat, I'd be like, well, God ain't a real physical thing here that's helping me in my life, in some of the many great ways that my partner is. So
Exactly.
he can fuck right off.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I do like that. That is like I don't want to say harmful, but I do feel like it's kind of like harmful thinking that it kind of stunts you emotionally. It doesn't allow you to have real meaningful interactions, to really like uh you know like emotionally and physically and spiritually, like in the in the like in the earthly sense, kind of
Hmm.
attach yourself to another person. Because
Hmm.
I think I think a lot of that is a fear, though, that like you just don't want to get hurt.
Yeah. And like the radical love that I know I had for God at one point, you could straight up call it an addiction. It was an absolute addiction.
Oh yeah, it is. It's like it warps your way of thinking in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. Like if I definitely live my life by a certain, set of core values, and moderation is up there for me, and that includes in human relationships. It's like if a person is becoming to me too much of a crutch, I have to examine that relationship, and God, though, was exempt from that rule for so long in my life because we were preached like, no, it's okay. We don't want you to be addicted to heroin.
Be addicted to God.
Yeah, but we want you to be
Like
addicted to this thing over
it's
here.
like what is it? There's that Cheech and Chong uh skit that or one of those from one of their albums because my dad had the Cheech and Chong albums. It was I was all messed up on drugs. No, I'm all messed up on God, man. Like
Yeah.
but uh but yeah, like I don't know, like this movie, like it has the big moments and it has all that. I just don't feel like it has any sort of connective tissue story for me. And I feel like Chuck
Mm.
Smith, for a large part of this movie, he's just there. He exists. It's like the first half of this movie, Lonnie Frisbee's doing the heavy lifting and he's running that church. And Chuck Smith is just kind of like in the audience, basically, says a few words, pops back out, and his part's done. Like in the second half of the movie, it's Greg.
Hmm.
Like Chuck is like he's a bump on a log. If this is supposed to be some, some great you know, what's the word I'm looking for here? Like some great memoir to Chuck Smith, then I feel like they have massively missed the mark.
Yeah.
Because if it's about Calvary Chapel Costa Mesa, it's about Chuck, right? Because Lonnie's there for a minute. Chuck's there throughout.
Yeah. I mean, the Jesus movement at, at large is an amazing awakening of spiritual thinking in this country.
Yeah, I mean, it's good if it makes
Because
you healthy and happy. Great.
yeah, because we cannot gloss over the fact that the predecessor to the Jesus movement is barbaric.
Yeah.
And the Jesus movement, uh, in a lot of ways, sort of tamed down some of the absolute horror shows that were going on in the Old Testament and things that have kind of like flowed into some more like traditional, um, you know, Christian paradigms or theologies. So in that way, it was kind of like it was radical. But if you're listening now and you go to Calvary Chapel and you haven't seen this movie, I think it's worth watching. But I also think you need to dig into the back end of your church.
Yes.
Look into all the messiness because it's just better for you anyways to be informed. And
I mean, yeah.
because yeah, this movie, if you don't do that, if you haven't done that already, what this movie will do probably is just sort of affirm you in your faith, and you'll feel that what you call the Holy Spirit welling up within you. You'll feel all that. I guarantee it. And
Yeah.
you'll go home and you'll tell all your Christian friends, and they'll go do this. Many of them will go do the same thing. But if you are a Calvary Chapelite and you haven't seen this and you are willing to be objective, you should definitely have the movie, but also enjoy some time Googling into all the messiness.
Yeah, do a little bit of research because I mean, like there was when you're talking about that, there's one thing that I kind of remember because I used to listen to the Chuck Smith radio show all the time.
Oh yeah, K
Like
Wave.
back when we were working on when we were at Cragen
Hmm.
and I'd be out on the
Yeah.
road, I'd have the Chuck
Yep.
Smith radio show on,
Yeah.
and there was one like aside from the people that would call in and be like, I jerk off too much and like that was like 25% of the calls right there. One of like those like, I get it. It's like that's unhealthy. That's unhealthy. Go meet people. Get them to jerk you off. But okay. Like then there's my public service announcement. But um uh what was it? There was a call where this, I can't remember if it was a woman or a man, but somebody called in and was like, it was a guy. He's like, I cheated on my wife 5 years ago. Um, and like, I just feel guilty and I want to tell her. And, and Chuck Smith said, no, wait, like you're still young in your relationship. And if you tell her right now, it's going to ruin your relationship and you're going to end up divorced. It's like, wait 5 years and then tell her. So he literally counseled somebody to wait 10 years after their affair. So you've been harboring a secret for 10 years that you're going to tell somebody. Like, how insane is this logic?
Yeah, and secondly, there's a lot of frameworks for treatment that psychotherapists use that are backed by like mounds and mounds of data. We know a lot of these protocols work in treating couples, for example.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this, if your pastor is also offering you couples counseling, they are not credentialed to do so.
No, they're not.
Being a Christian is not a recognized model of it's not a recognized certificate within marriage and family therapy. And that was the thing I saw at Calvary too, was like Calvary Chapel pastors had their calendars booked with counseling sessions. And I know because at that time, I mean, I went and saw the pastor of our Calvary Chapel several times during his openings.
Oh, my mom did.
Yeah. And looking back now, I'm just like, oh my God, like, ugh, sorry.
I
It's so
mean,
cringy, the
yeah,
things that,
no, yeah, yeah. I mean, luckily, I mean, you know, like I don't think my dad would mind me sharing this. I mean, luckily it was good advice because I still think about it now.
yeah,
Like it's a weird thing to say, like, at least it was good advice. Yeah. But no, like it was actually like good, solid advice. Like, because the advice is only as good as the person if you don't have a good, solid, like educational framework behind it. Um, but like what was it, my mom was dealing a lot with the fact that her parents were, just not great people.
hmm,
Like, I think they're both passed now. Like, there was abuse involved, there was just a lot of stuff. And she was struggling with, like, how do I honor my father and mother, and like when they've done all this to me. And she kind of, and Pastor Ed basically told her, um like, are they worth honoring? It's like, you get to decide if you honor. And he was actually capricious enough to not go strictly by the book and be like, well, the book says it, so you got to do it. No, he's like, well, if they sucked, then like you don't have to do it. I
yeah,
mean, so like I'm just thankful that that was good advice, even though it's coming from somebody who's genuinely not a therapist.
yeah. I mean, you're right. Like, no matter who you are, I mean, even an eight ball gives good advice a percentage of the time, right?
Yeah, it's like what is it, that saying, a broken clock is right twice a day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm grateful for. I'll end this on a positive note because I feel like I'm getting a little ranty, but like I'm very grateful for all the memories I made in the 26 years that I was part of the Christian movement.
Yeah.
I regret a lot of the ways I treated people during that time because I saw other people as, witness opportunities. Oh, there's someone that needs Jesus. There's someone that needs Jesus, and so I have a lot of regrets in that area, but I'm thankful to have ended up where I'm at now. And I actually do kind of feel sorry for people who are stuck. I don't want it to sound
Oh,
like
yeah.
I've got a bone to pick with Jesus because that's the last thing I want to put out there.
But all right, so we should probably wrap up. But I mean, I do like, I do recommend this movie. I mean, if not, like, if you're not a believer, for the sheer entertainment value, like, it could work for you. But I think this movie is aimed at Christians. They're gonna say, oh, it's an evangelical tool. Like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
Like, there is no person that you're going to convince with this movie. Thank you for listening, and And we will talk to you next month on Everything Gets Berated.
See ya.